Hi, I'm Ben Ferguson, and welcome to your AMAC Weekly News. First up, liberals are fighting for illegal immigrants to continue to receive tax dollars and payments under the COVID-19 bailout while Americans are still hurting. Also, those trying to scam unemployment funding by refusing to return to work after they're offered their job back got some bad news this week. I'll give you more on that in just a moment. Up next, the mainstream media is so focused on how they can attack our president that they're actually missing out on the real news stories that are important to all Americans right now. Now, their latest attack included fat shaming and claiming that President Donald Trump is only using hydroxychloroquine to, quote, distract us from what his administration is really doing. I'll tell you what the big news stories are that they're ignoring in just a moment. And finally, our very own AMAC spokesman, Bobby Charles, updates us on the latest news about the newest socialist manifesto that just passed through the House of Representatives. All that and more in just a moment. But a quick reminder, if you haven't shared this video with your friends, do it now on social media. Your AMAC Weekly News starts right now. If liberal plans to give away free stuff wasn't enough, they're now determined to bypass assistance for our first responders while making sure that they give away as much money as they possibly can to illegal immigrants. That's right. Apparently now it's more important to liberals that illegal immigrants get assistance than it is for our first responders. Perfect example. In their new $3 trillion wish list that was passed through the House of Representatives, there are stimulus checks that are going to go out to illegal aliens. Not only that, but a plan similar to this is already being implemented in the state of California. This past week, Governor Gavin Newsom of California warned that his state and local budgets are, quote, so stressed that they may need to begin laying off first responders. Well, at the exact same time they're doing this, California is moving forward with its radical plan to actually distribute $75 million in taxpayer funds directly to illegal immigrants on a first-come, first-served basis. You also have New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio, who flat out said this week that he is willing to lose stimulus funds from the federal government if he cannot protect illegal immigrants. Take a look at this from an interview on Fox News.
Is there any way you could pull back on your sanctuary city laws and follow the rule of the law when it comes to immigration?
We follow
then maybe the Trump administration will want to work with you.
We follow the rule of the law in this city, and we respect the fact there's 500,000 people here who happen to be undocumented.
Now, to be clear, liberals aren't just fighting for illegal immigrants. They're also now trying to allow people who are on unemployment to remain on unemployment even if they are offered their old job back and they refuse to take it. That's right. There are millions unemployed in our country, and they want people to be able to continue to get free checks from the federal government, even if they have a chance to go back to work. Now, why would they not want to go back to work, you may ask? Well, many of them are getting more money under unemployment programs than they made while on the job because of the special COVID-19 bonus checks that they are receiving every week. Now, Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin made it very clear this week that this is not going to be allowed to continue. Mnuchin appeared at the Senate committee hearing, aired on CNBC, and I want you to hear what he had to say when he was asked a question by a senator about people basically freeloading off the government.
You know, we are aware of the technical problem here, and we want to have a technical fix on the unemployment insurance. But specifically, let me just comment on the PPP. If you offer back a worker and they don't take that job, you will be required to notify the local unemployment insurance agency because that person will no longer be eligible for unemployment.
Now, to be clear, yes, people are trying to game the system, and this is taking more American tax dollars and giving it to people that are unwilling to work, that are able-bodied, and that is also hurting the businesses that are offering them their jobs back. Now, what's worse is actually the liberals in Congress aren't doing much better. The truth is, they in Congress have set a terrible example as they're actually trying to game the system as well. The House decided, in their words, it's best for them to be able to vote from home or while they're at the beach. Conservatives in the House believe that it is time for Congress to reopen, clearly with safety precautions. Now, the Democrats decided to pass a resolution through the House allowing them to vote remotely, meaning that members of Congress are getting their full salaries and could vote from the beach while drinking some sort of island drink. Yes, this passed with 0 Republican votes and actually 3 Democrats voting against this insane resolution. Now, they also want us to continue to pay them their entire paycheck in Congress as they sit at home or on the beach drinking their island drink. Now, at the same time, Americans are jobless or having to risk their health to return to work in order to pay their bills. Liberals are trying to game our own system and steal from our economy. We have got to fight back, and AMAC is here to make sure that your tax dollars are not being abused the way that Congress, or at least the Democrats, are trying to do it right now. We here at AMAC have noticed something that's been pretty interesting and honestly shocking. The mainstream media skipping over real news stories that are important to you in order to continue to attack the President of the United States of America, Donald Trump. Look at their latest attack. They're attacking the president for taking his doctor's orders, using hydroxychloroquine, and now they're claiming the president's doing this to distract you. From what is the question I would be asking? Now, this was not a random idea by President Donald Trump. This is something that was prescribed by an actual doctor, and it is a medication that's been given out to many people that might need to protect themselves against exposure to COVID-19. In fact, there are countless frontline workers using it for the exact same purpose at a prescription given to them because of a doctor. Now, the media should acknowledge this, but they're not. Instead, what they're doing is saying that the president is giving out bad medical advice, even though he can't prescribe this drug to himself. Senator Chuck Schumer, obviously a Democrat, appeared on MSNBC and went a step further, claiming that the president taking this drug is, quote, reckless and a diversion. Take a look.
I think in New York, we're balancing things very carefully. Unlike the sort of whimsical, impulsive, and erratic behavior of the president, who, as you said, looks for diversions all the time. When you run away from the truth, when you just do something that appeals to your ego, whether it's true or not every day, you will not succeed in either the health crisis or the economic crisis. And what he did last night is just an example, as you mentioned. It's reckless to tell people he's using hydrochloroquine. All the experts say, at best, it doesn't help. So what about senior citizens who don't go to the doctor, who take hydrochloroquine listening to the president? And at worst, it hurts you. So I don't know why he did it. Maybe he has family or friends who own part of the company. It's not unlike this president. Someone at Mar-a-Lago or someone on the phone tells him, oh, this is a good company, and he just talks about it. Maybe he did it to divert attention from all the bad things happening. And maybe he's just lying. This president doesn't tell the truth. He may be taking this, he may not. What he does is whatever suits his ego at the moment.
You may have noticed there that Chuck Schumer completely ignored the question that he was asked and immediately started to attack President Donald Trump. Now, to be clear, he isn't the only one who went out of his way to attack President Trump on this issue this past week. Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, literally called him, referring to the president, morbidly obese. That's right. The Speaker of the House called our president morbidly obese. Take a look at this from CNN.
As far as the president is concerned, he's our president, and I would rather he not be taking something that has not been approved by the scientists, especially in his age group and in his, shall we say, weight group, what is morbidly obese, they say. So I think it's not a good idea.
Now, to be clear, liberals are pushing these stories, and the media is giving them a platform to insult the president and not cover other issues that are really important. Here's a real news story that everyone should be talking about. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo suddenly decided to make nursing homes a top priority this past week. I would argue too little too late. Now, you may not even know about this issue, but you should. Back on March the 25th, Cuomo issued an executive order forcing nursing homes to accept patients who had tested positive for COVID-19, despite testing deficiencies for both residents and staff members. He literally told the places housing our most vulnerable people in this country to accept the virus back into their facilities without any extra assistance. Now, to put it in perspective for you, what the governor has done, from March 1st to May 1st, more than 4,800 people have died from COVID-19 in nursing homes in New York. This accounts for more than 25% of all deaths in the state. Now get this, he didn't reverse this terrible policy until May the 11th. Now lawmakers are calling for answers. U.S. Representative Stefanik of New York tweeted this out. Today, I joined my New York GOP colleagues in the House to call for a federal investigation of Cuomo's failed nursing home policies. Now, they admit they had unethically changed the way they reported nursing home deaths. An inexcusable tragedy for New York. Need answers. Now, we all need answers to this. This is inexcusable. And it's also inexcusable that the mainstream media, many of them that live in New York, are more focused on attacking our president and a prescription that he got from his doctor than actually holding leaders accountable like Governor Cuomo, who made a policy that put people at risk and then they died from COVID-19. It's time for us to make our voices heard. And it's also time for the media to do their job, which is to report on this real story. It has been obviously a massive week in news, not only with the news media being incredibly biased against the President of the United States of America, but also undercovering a massive story, which is Democrats in Washington, with their $3 trillion package they just passed out of the House, giving hundreds of millions of dollars to illegal immigrants while Americans are hurting. Joining me now to talk about that is a spokesman for AMAC, Bobby Charles. Bobby, I appreciate you coming on AMAC Weekly News. This is something that you would think would have had wall-to-wall coverage. You have people who are supposed to be representing the citizens of the United States of America while they're hurting, while they're out of work with unprecedented unemployment numbers that we are seeing, actually giving money directly to illegal immigrants, and governors doing the same thing. Governor Newsom in California giving $500 checks to illegal immigrants. This is shocking to me that not only they're doing it, but the media is giving them cover for it.
No, you're absolutely right. There are a number of stories in the mainstream media, or that ought to be in the mainstream media, that aren't there. And this is a big one. It's an extension of what the Democrats, of course, have done for a long time, which is to spend state money on illegal immigrants and then come back to the federal government and look to replenish their state pools with our taxpayer dollars from the rest of the country. And it's particularly egregious in the sanctuary city and sanctuary state environments. But this $3 trillion bill, you're absolutely right. What happened in that bill is that they pumped in money for illegal aliens. That's what Nancy Pelosi would like to have done. I'm sure that they think there's some electoral benefit in doing that. But at the end of the day, you've got more than 33 million Americans who have applied for unemployment benefits. A lot of those states can't even get their unemployment benefits out the door to those Americans who applied and justly should receive them. And at the same time, you've got these illegal immigrants that are apparently able to walk up and take a check. And it is egregious, and it is something that we ought to all be thinking about and worried about.
You know, one of the very interesting things, we have a lot of AMAC members in Florida, a lot of AMAC members in Georgia, for example. Those two governors were proactive in opening their states up in a responsible way. The media's response and the elected official response was disgusting, almost hoping that there would be a spike in numbers so they could then say, look how irresponsible you are. When you compare that to what's happened, for example, with Governor Cuomo, with this glowing media buzz around him, that he's doing such a great job. We know people have died because of his policies. He forced seniors who were in good health to go into these retirement nursing home facilities. They ended up catching COVID-19 and passing away. And no one's been writing the articles about that. But these two governors, Republican governors, go out there and open up their state in a responsible manner. Far less COVID cases in those states in New York or California, to put it in perspective. Same thing with Texas. And we see the media doing everything they can to undermine this decision, hoping for doom and gloom.
Yeah, no, I think you're exactly right. You know, people forget that actually something like more than 52% of all the deaths have occurred in 1% of the counties in this country, mostly around the New York, New Jersey area, and a couple of other small hotspots. And then, believe it or not, more than 50% of the counties in this country, including many in Georgia, have had 0 deaths. And so I think one of the things people forget is that there are policies that are working in protecting the Bill of Rights, protecting the right of people to get back to work. And Georgia and Florida represent 2 of those states. At the same time, the media is giving a free pass to a lot of these governors who made wrong calls at the beginning. who've decided that all of a sudden they're going to be on the side of goodness and light. But in fact, at the very beginning, they put seniors at risk and they put a lot of others at risk. So, this is, unfortunately, we're in a season when it's all going to get partisan. But the irony in all this is if we had some of the news anchors and folks out there that historically were out reporting on things 10, 15, 20 years ago, you'd see balanced stories. You don't see that right now. And it's certainly unfortunate.
One of the most shocking stories that has not been talked about is how some of these liberal governors are actually not just threatening, but actually locking up protesters, locking up business owners that are opening up early and saying, we're going to punish you. At the same time, they have been letting out violent criminals and convicted criminals from jail, even from jails that have not had a single case of COVID-19. We saw Paul Manafort, for example, who was able to get away with getting out of jail about 5 years early. Only because he petitioned that he was at risk for COVID. Not a single person in his jail had gotten COVID-19. He is now under, quote, house arrest. You see this happening all over the country where these criminals are getting out, and yet the governors are now attacking business owners, small business owners, and individuals are saying, we need to reopen. You're destroying our entire life's work.
Yeah, you're right, Ben, again. And, you're really pointing out two egregious acts. One is that these governors are using this as an excuse, particularly the Democrat governors, to let folks out of state prisons, which is really completely inappropriate. You're talking about a society that's closed down and a jail that's closed down within a society that's closed down, and somehow they have a right to get out of jail when they actually are there for reasons that are obviously due and right. The second thing, of course, is this constitutional rights issue, and people forget that you have both constitutional rights under a state constitution and also under the federal constitution, and one of those rights is the First Amendment right, not only free speech and free worship, freedom of religion, but also the right to travel around. And in that is embedded other rights like the ability to keep making a living, putting food on the table for your family. One of the things, again, there's a piece up on the AMAC site today that I wrote, but you will find that one of the things that's happening is that you're getting a spiking of deaths because people have been kept inside because they have not been able to get out and get back to work. So you've got heart attacks and cancer is likely rising, and you've got other related domestic abuse, suicides, and other issues. And, the president has spoken very persuasively to this. He has said it is time for America to get back to work. So we will be cautious. We will trust our citizens. And those states that are doing that, Florida, Georgia, and others, are really showing it can be done with without great risk.
One thing that AMAC is really doing, and I want to get an update from you, is on China policy and holding China accountable for what they have done to our country, our economy, with not warning us, lying to the WHO, having the WHO lie to the rest of the world, and putting everyone at risk the way they have. Where are we now with actual policy that could hold them accountable for what has happened?
So you make a very good point. And of course, one of the things AMAC does is they're very active in Washington, and they're pushing the envelope on trying to get us away from being dependent on China. And we do have members, including Tom Cotton, who are listening closely to that message. People forget we get 95% of our ibuprofen from China. We get 91% of our hydrocortisone. We get 70% of our acetaminophen, that's Tylenol. We get 40% of our penicillin, 40% of our heparin. We get 80 to 90% of the constituents for all our antibiotics. And two big, dinner bells, if you will, two big warning bells have been rung out of this crisis. One is do not stay dependent on China. China is a bad actor. And I think that's going to be a long-term learned lesson. And the second, of course, is the defense of our Bill of Rights, that people always thought, no, they can't be taken away. My Second Amendment right, my First Amendment right. Truth be told, they can be taken away. And you have to stand up and you have to defend them in every era. Ronald Reagan, who I worked for, made it very clear that it's not passed down through the bloodstream. The defense of freedom has to be taught to each generation. And maybe the silver lining in this moment is that we are learning that our freedoms are precious. Our self-reliance is precious. We cannot give away our self-reliance and our freedom to China, and we certainly can't give it away at home.
If there's anything that is very similar between Donald Trump and Ronald Reagan, is both of them seem to understand the issues with China and do not trust them, as you put it there, a bad actor. Bobby Charles, spokesman for AMAC, I really appreciate you coming on today. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Ben.
Once again, a big thank you to our spokesman here at AMAC, Bobby Charles, for joining us today. That's it for this edition of your AMAC Weekly News. And a quick reminder, if you haven't shared this with your family and friends, make sure you do that right now on social media. And if you haven't joined AMAC or renewed your AMAC membership, do it now so you can continue to receive this show and access to our amazing member benefits. You also get the AMAC magazine, and most importantly, AMAC is fighting for you and more than 2 million other conservatives on Capitol Hill every day. I'm Ben Ferguson. I'll see you back next week for our next episode.